What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 27 deadline. And as a heads up, the deadline is on Tuesday at 6 PM UK time. So we're only a few days away. Do not miss that. And because of the quick turnaround, I've decided to put a video out instead of streaming tonight. And I'm recording it before Sunday's games. So before the Forest-Newcastle game and before Man City and Liverpool, anything important from those matches, I'll cover in videos on Monday and Tuesday, so no panic there. So hopefully this is helpful. If it is, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. So let's start with Morgan Rogers. It was his 6th blank game week in a row yesterday, which is not ideal. He also picked up a knock. For anyone that didn't see it, Nkunku made a tackle on him, and it was quite a heavy impact. Afterwards, he was hobbling around a bit. It did get a bit better, but after a while, he asked Unai Emery to take him off. This is what Unai Emery said after the game. Morgan Rogers is playing a lot of minutes because physically he can do it, which is obviously good going forward as long as he's fit. But today he had a kick and he was asking me to replace him. Hopefully he could play on Tuesday. The good news is if you're an owner and you're looking to play him in Game Week 27, because it's a Tuesday game, you'll hear from Unai Emery in a press conference on Monday. And there's nothing wrong with holding on to him if he's already in your squad. 6 blanks in a row, not great. But Palace away and Brentford away are not terrible fixtures. But I would say overall, because of the blank in 29, it's also another away game in 30 against Brighton. He probably can be sold if you've got the spare transfer. I'm going to talk about cheap midfielders later on. If you're a non-Rodgers owner, there's no need to consider buying him whatsoever. No matter what chip strategy you're on, it's probably not a great time to buy an Aston Villa midfielder. So Ethan Nwaneri was subbed around the 80th minute against West Ham with no attacking return, so it was a blank for him. And as he walked off the pitch, it did look like he was limping a little bit. Now, Mikel Arteta spoke about it after the game and said he's hopefully not injured and thinks it was just fatigue. But there is a small amount of doubt there. And Arsenal do play on Wednesday against Forest away, so we'll get a press conference on Tuesday. If you're thinking about buying him, or he's in your squad and you're hoping to play him this week, I would definitely wait until you hear that press conference before you make any decisions. For those of us that do have him in our squads, there's probably no need to panic. Like for my team, I can probably bench him this week anyway. I suspect until Martinelli and Saka are back, he'll keep getting good minutes unless, he's obviously injured. So he's fine to play over the next 2-3 game weeks. If you're a non-owner though, and you were considering him, obviously at 4.6 million, he still represents really good value. But the window to buy him was probably before West Ham at home or Leicester away. Like Forest away, Man United away, Chelsea home's not awful, but you're also buying before 2 away games. And Forest have obviously defended pretty well so far this season. I haven't seen the match between Newcastle and Forest from Game Week 26 yet, but generally over this season they've been pretty good. And it's not the worst time to play Man United and Chelsea, absolutely not. But I just don't know if I'd bother buying Nwaneri unless I really needed the money for another move. I think the time to do it is maybe past a little bit. There's lots of good midfielders between 5 and kind of 6.5 million, which we're going to talk about later. So slight doubt going into Game Week 27. He'll probably be fine. Let's see what Arteta says on Tuesday. So there were a few people last week talking about potentially going for Christopher Nkunku as a bit of a differential. And I kind of said I would wait until after the Aston Villa game, get another week's worth of information, and then potentially buy him before the plum fixture that is Southampton at home in 27 and Leicester at home in 28. I think I would be ignoring him this week. My worry is that he might not even start. Maresca has previous this season for rotating players in easier fixtures. And even though they've got so many attacking injuries right now, I don't think you can guarantee that Nkunku's going to play. If you look at the lineup that Chelsea went with against Villa, it was Caicedo and James in midfield, Gusto right back, Cole Palmer on the right, Enzo Fernandez a bit more advanced, Neto was the 9, and then Nkunku on the left. Now, it's quite a fluid setup, right? Players can move position in-game, but ultimately you've got Nkunku off the left. And when you look at the subs bench, they don't have a huge amount of attackers to bring on, like Tyreek George, for example, but they do have Jadon Sancho. So they could play this exact same formation and just play Sancho in one of the wide positions and Nkunku drops out. It could be that Reece James drops out, Enzo Fernandez goes a bit deeper, and Nkunku plays the 10, Sancho comes in. That could happen. But the fact that we even need to have this conversation means there's slight doubts there. And I just don't know if it's worth it. Like obviously, you look at Southampton at home, Leicester at home, huge potential for points. And if he starts both of those games, he probably will do really well. But there's so many other good midfielders at that price point. I don't know if I would risk it. And in Game Week 29, it's Arsenal away anyway, which is pretty tough. And then 30 onwards, players like Jackson will probably start coming back from injury. So I don't want to talk people out of going for what on paper looks like such a nice punt. But if he's not in the lineup against Southampton, I don't think it'll be a complete shock. So if you are looking for a new cheap midfielder, who'd you go for? This is the list that I've come up with. So I've got Kudus, Mitoma, the 3 Bournemouth midfielders, so Semenyo, Kluivert and Utara. And then I put Asensio on the list because I think people will want me to talk about him after the 2 goals against Chelsea. But ultimately, if you don't already own Aston Villa players, I think you just got to ignore them no matter what chip strategy you're on. Palace away, Brentford away, blank, Brighton away. Doesn't look that great. And I think Asensio will do really well. But if you're free hitting in 29, I'd maybe even look at someone like Eze instead from Crystal Palace. Better fixtures before the blank and a double afterwards. So I think Asensio you've just got to ignore. Same with Marcus Rashford. I kind of use Mitoma at 6.4 million as the cut-off point for price. But I also wanted to do a quick shout out to Trossard at 6.9 million if you've got a bit more money to spend. But obviously, like I said with Nwaneri, the time to probably go and get him was before West Ham or Leicester. I know we only got 1 assist in those 2 games, but in terms of fixtures, they were probably the ones. Forest away, Man United away, Chelsea at home doesn't look quite so good, but it's not terrible. If you want to go for Trossard, you want to back Arsenal, absolutely fine. In terms of the rest, Kudus continues to put up okay underlying numbers, but nothing special. Now, they're not terrible compared to other players on this list, but he's one of those. I've said this so many times before. I know he's a great player, right? I watch him play. He's really fun to watch as well. Underlying numbers are never that special, but also he always plays 90 minutes. And I think Leicester at home, Newcastle at home, Everton away, next 3 fixtures up until the blank is quite nice. Like a lot of the players on this list have away games, whereas at least the next 2 for West Ham are at home. You've got that Arsenal fixture out of the way, although obviously they went and won it. And Leicester at home just looks like such a good fixture right now. And Kudus is a massive differential. So at 6.2, I quite like him. Mitoma is on a ridiculous run of form at the moment. I say ridiculous, right? He's probably not that good, but he has done really well recently. Let me just bring up his numbers here. So it was another goal against Southampton, goal against Chelsea the game before that. He did blank against Forest and Everton, but before that it was 2 returns against Man United, 1 goal against Ipswich as well. So 4 goals in the last 6 game weeks and an assist. At 6.4, he's looking good. And it's 2 home games up next, Bournemouth and Fulham. But it's Man City away in 29, which is a little bit tougher. So I like Mitoma. And arguably, I'd rather have Mitoma for the next 2 fixtures than Kudus. But I think overall, looking at the next 3, I'd probably go for the punt on the West Ham man instead. I really wouldn't forget about Bournemouth players. I think against Southampton, the 3 midfielders all return, but none of them got like a huge double-digit score. And then they've all blanked against Wolves. So I think you can sometimes be not in danger, that's the wrong way of wording it, but you can sometimes get into a position where you stop thinking about them, like they were so hyped up and now all of a sudden they haven't done amazingly over the last 2 and then you kind of forget about them. I still think they're really worth looking at. The Bournemouth attack is just genuinely good. And although it's away games in the next 2, Brighton and Spurs is not awful. Brentford at home in the blank is nice. And then Ipswich at home in 30 if you're playing all the way through. Maybe if you're looking to wildcard in 31 or 32 instead, is really nice. Evanilson is not just close to being back. He was on the bench yesterday. So that is a little bit of a worry if he comes back into that number 9 position soon. I don't see him starting in game week 27 because of the quick turnaround, but 28 onwards, we might see that happen. I don't necessarily think it means that Utara drops out. He could go to the wing. He may even continue playing number 9 because he's done well there, but it does put a bit more doubts on his minutes. Honestly, if you've got the money, I think I'd buy Semenyo right now. Even someone like Kluivert, who's obviously on penalties and great if he continues playing, which he probably will continue starting. He has been subbed early a few times the last couple of games. So if we look against Wolves, it was 72 minutes, 76 against Southampton. That's kind of what we saw earlier on in the season. So we might be kind of going back to that. And it's not to say he's a bad option, because he's absolutely not. And he's done really well this year. But I think I would buy Semenyo out of all of them. I bought Utara, even though we knew Evanilson was getting close, because I thought he'd still be a couple of games away. I'm a little bit more worried. I think he's done well enough to stay in that team, but it's not a guarantee. The only one of those 3 that I'm super confident will play all the matches is Semenyo. So I'd probably say kind of 6.4 or under, Kudus, Mitoma, Semenyo. I like Semenyo if you're playing the longer game. if you're going a bit shorter term, maybe Kudus is a bit of a differential. So speaking of West Ham, I've got to talk about Jarrod Bowen at 7.3 million. It's quite funny because a few people asked me about him last game week and the game week before, and I said I quite liked him as an option, but I would wait until after the Arsenal game. So of course, he went and scored against Arsenal and got a 10-pointer, which was nice for anyone that got on him early. And since he's been back fit, he started every game as we've come to expect. The minutes have been good. A goal against Chelsea, a blank against Brentford, and 1 goal against Arsenal as well. So it's 2 in the last 3. And this season so far, he's had 7 goals, 6 assists, so 13 returns in 22 starts. He always gets good minutes when he starts. And at the moment for West Ham, Paquetá's out with an injury. So Jarrod Bowen is probably on penalties as well. So he just looks like a really great option. Right now, the 2 fixtures we're targeting, or 3, Leicester, Southampton, Ipswich mostly, Jarrod Bowen's got that right in front of him. It's another another home game against Newcastle in 28. Not easy, of course, but not bad either. Then Everton away in the blank. And even after that, if you have to keep him a little bit longer, Wolves away and Bournemouth at home. And I never mind having to hold players like this that you know are always going to start, that are probably on penalties with Paquetá out, and the minutes are good. If you're picking fresh and you're going for Bowen or Mbeumo, I think that decision's quite tough. But obviously with Mbeumo, you've just missed the Leicester game, right? He's just got his 14-pointer in that match. Next few fixtures, 2 home games, Everton and Villa, and then in the blank it's Bournemouth away. So it's Everton, Villa, Bournemouth versus Leicester, Newcastle, Everton. Obviously the Everton game for West Ham's away. I think it's a really close call. And if you genuinely believe the same and you're looking to if you're looking to go for one of those 2 players, I think I pick Bowen. You've got Leicester right in front of you, and he's much more of a differential than Mbeumo. So I said in game week 26, I thought it was objectively a bad decision to be selling Cole Palmer before Aston Villa away. Not necessarily because that was such a good fixture, but for what was coming afterwards with Southampton at home and Leicester at home. And I do stand by that, but inevitably he did blank again. And that is now just 1 assist in the last 5 game weeks, a 6-pointer against West Ham in game week 24. He's blanked against all of Aston Villa, Brighton, Man City and Wolves. Hasn't scored since the Bournemouth at home game in game week 21. Not ideal for a player that costs around 11 million. And I get why people are frustrated with him. But again, it's the same thing as last week. You just cannot sell him before Southampton at home and Leicester at home. There is no world where that makes sense. His numbers for the season are still good. These things can change around so quickly. And I get it. Chelsea have not been playing well. Palmer looked frustrated in that Villa game yesterday. There was a moment, I think, in the second half where he kind of slipped over a little bit and didn't quite get the shot off. And I just felt like if that was game week 6 or game week 7, something like that, he would have put that chance away and probably gone on to got more as well. So he is not in a great moment. And I don't necessarily think it's him individually, but probably Chelsea as a whole. But you know what? I would not be surprised if Chelsea's form looks a little bit better after Southampton and Leicester, to the point where you could maybe even think about captaining Palmer, but I'll save that discussion for another video. So if you've got him, you cannot sell. I still don't think most people really need the money anyway. If you're going to do it, it's game week 29 before Arsenal away. I also shouldn't forget that there might be some people out there that don't own Cole Palmer that are wondering whether or not to bring him back. I would say this, if you've got the money and a route to him that's pretty straightforward, doesn't require tons of hits, and that was always the plan, then yeah, I would probably just get him. I would not be surprised if he walks away with 10 points plus from each of the next 2 fixtures. And I just think he is worth it. And if you have to play him against Arsenal in game week 29, yeah, on paper it's not a great fixture, but it's really not the end of the world for a nailed-on penalty taker. And the fixtures after 29 are good as well. So I would consider buying him. If it's going to take like a -8, 12, and it really hurts the rest of your team, then go without him and hope for the best, because most people are still going to captain Salah against Newcastle in 27 anyway. So the damage shouldn't be massive. But if you can get him, I probably would. So with Cunha, it's fairly straightforward. I think this week, if you're looking for a new forward, there's probably not many options that are better to bring in. Next 3 fixtures, Fulham at home, Everton at home, and Southampton away in the blank. We know he's going to play every single match that he's fit for. On penalties, costs less than 7 million at 6.9. He's just a really good option. The only other forwards that I would even remotely consider is Mateta, if you're free hit 29, because you get Villa at home in 27, which is probably similar to having Fulham at home like Wolves has. There's not too much difference between the fixtures. And then Ipswich at home in 28, which is great. The blank in 29 doesn't matter because you're free hitting. Then you walk straight into Southampton away in game week 30, followed by Brighton at home and a double in game week 32. So Mateta if you're free hit 29. And I guess if you've got the money, you could bring in Erling Haaland for Spurs away in 27, Forest away in 28, Brighton at home in 29, Leicester at home in 30. But I suspect most people aren't sitting there with about 7 million in the bank, and you're waiting to sell probably Cole Palmer in 29. Outside of that, there is no other forward that I would buy. Visser, for example, I still think is a really nice option. He is currently 6.4. We know the Brentford fixtures, because I already spoke about in Burmo earlier. He's great, but I think if you've got 0.5 million more, I just take Cunha instead, because you've got penalties and you've got that Southampton fixture in 29. So there's lots of good forwards at the moment, but Cunha is probably the standout for game week 27. So if you're looking for one, just buy him. So I just want to go through some notes from the weekend. Quick reminder that I am recording this before the Newcastle Forest game and the Man City Liverpool game on Sunday, just because of the quick turnaround with the Tuesday deadline. Anything major that comes out of those two matches, I will cover in videos on Monday and Tuesday. So no panic there. In terms of reaction to assistant manager chip, I've still got Arne Slot to play for my team, so we'll see how that goes. Glasner's obviously smashed it as the table bonus manager from game week 26, a 20-pointer. Pereira obviously did really well against Bournemouth as well, but I think in the community, the most popular table bonus manager probably was Glasner. Fair play if you went there. This is why I didn't particularly like the chip when it was announced, because I knew the swings would be big. And you can sit there and say that Glasner was obviously better than Arteta. That is fair enough. A lot of people said that before the deadline, so it's not necessarily hindsight. But I don't think picking Arteta, even with the attacking injuries Arsenal have got, was a bad decision before West Ham at home. To have a 20-point swing, it just feels like too much to me. And that's only one game week, right? Potentially you could have them every single game week over the 3 that you play it. So that's just a quick reaction to the assistant manager chip. Hopefully Slot does well for me, but it's looking like a big mistake not going for Glasner. As expected, not to be trusted, Ipswich and Leicester. I just had that nagging feeling for both of those teams, and obviously they both got smashed, but Glasner great. On the Visser assist for the Carvalho goal, I think it was, personally I don't think it was an assist. When I saw it originally, like in real time, I thought maybe, but as soon as I saw the first replay, it seemed pretty clear that the defender touched it. And the funny thing is, every time I see a new angle posted on Twitter under the title, "This is clear and obvious, it was definitely this," I don't think it's all that clear. So I don't care if they give it. It's 3 points, right? It really is not going to impact my season massively. And I do try and be quite fair with how I interpret assists like that. I just don't think there's a clear shot of Visser. There's stills that people are using, but they're not really that useful. So unless opt to change it, FPL are not going to change it. So if you're a Visser owner, you're probably not getting that assist, but who knows? You might get it later, and perhaps I'm just completely wrong. Bruno Fernandes might be back. Probably not. Don't buy Bruno Fernandes. But if you've got him, I said last week I wouldn't sell him for a hit. He did end up playing a little bit deeper for a lot of that game against Everton. But I think I would keep him, right? It's Ipswich this week. Fair enough if you want to sell him because you need money for another move. But if you don't, and you haven't got the spare transfer, just keep hold of him until you do have that spare transfer. I'm probably going to talk about cheap defenders to buy on the final thoughts video. But Dorgu potentially at Man United if you really want to take a punt for 4.5 million. Although right now buying Man United players does seem a little bit crazy. Given that Wolves fixtures turn now, I think Nwaneri is worth looking at. And potentially a Chelsea defender just because it's Southampton at home and Leicester at home. I probably wouldn't risk Reece James's fitness. Colwell at 4.4 might be an okay option, especially if you don't need him for 29 against Arsenal away. But I don't think buying defenders right now is that ideal. There's not a huge amount of standout great options apart from Munoz. But if you're not free hit 29, I wonder if you've just got to ignore him. And it's super annoying. Honestly, I haven't owned Chris Wood all season, and that just doesn't really annoy me all that much. Selling Munoz, I think it was such a mistake. Missing that Solanke price change when I could have just made the move on Friday weeks ago and then having to... I didn't have to sell Munoz, but I decided to. It was a mistake. We've got a right wing back for less than 5 million with genuine goal threat who's nailed on. Stupid. Stupid decision to sell him. And I feel like I just cannot buy him back. Like, there's part of me that thinks he might score well enough against Villa and Ipswich that the blank doesn't matter. But I'm never going to buy him with a blank. So if you're an owner, I'm jealous. But I wanted to use the weekend notes as a bit of a reaction because I'm not doing a stream tonight. João Pedro started, of course. We didn't know that Welbeck was injured. And so I didn't start him against Southampton. He got a 12-pointer. Extremely frustrating. If you're a João Pedro owner, he might start against Bournemouth, but it's going to depend if Welbeck's fit. If he is fit, there's no guarantee João Pedro will start. Getting a goal and assist against Southampton probably doesn't do you any harm, but we're still in this position of not knowing week in, week out if he's going to play unless we get injury news in advance. We just don't always get that. So I definitely wouldn't be buying him. Beto, I think, is a little bit underrated. I don't know if he's being talked about enough for what he's offering, and I include myself in that. I think because of his price, it's a little bit easier to maybe ignore him. Like, he's currently 5 million, so he's gone up. It's a goal in each of his last 4 games, 5 goals in the last 5 matches as well. And the fixtures are pretty good. Brentford away, Wolves away, West Ham at home. So although I'm saying Cunha is probably the best forward to buy, and I do stand by that, if you don't have the money, just buy Beto. Don't go out of your way to get money for other players. Next 3 fixtures good, especially if you're wildcarding in 30. Worth saying though, 30 is Liverpool away, Arsenal at home in 31, Forest away in 32. The fixtures do turn bad. So if you're thinking a bit longer term, maybe you can continue ignoring him. And then Brennan Johnson got a brace. It's his first start for a while. I would just ignore him. I wouldn't be buying him right now. Probably not buying a huge amount of Spurs players, I would say. I'm going to leave that video there. Make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with team selection. I'll have final thoughts on Tuesday as well. So plenty more time to cover other topics. Apologies for no stream, but just because of the short turnaround, I thought I'd get this video out as soon as possible instead. Thanks for watching. Catch you tomorrow.